It was a typical hot and humid late July day in Charleston, South Carolina, as I enjoyed a nice lunch with my friend Lisa. I've known Lisa for over 20 years, since we were freshmen in college together. We were only casual work colleagues until about 10 years ago when we enrolled in the same program to earn our master's degree in educational administration. It was during that time that we became really close, helping each other through the program, and now I consider her my best friend, and I think she considers me hers. We were talking about our summer and vacations when suddenly she said, "Can you never guess who I ran into at the supermarket last week?" Gosh, Lisa, you know how much I hate playing these guessing games. I have absolutely no idea who you ran into at the supermarket, so why don't you just tell me because I know you're about to die? Who did you run into last week? Well, I was rounding the corner of the aisle, distracted by my grocery list, when my cart collided with another cart. I looked up and started to apologize when I realized it was none other than, "Be prepared, your ex Kevin in front of me." I had to ask again to make sure, but it was definitely him. And I gotta say, girl, he looked pretty good. Didn't look like he'd aged much in the last, what is it, 15 years? When you were married, I'd only met him a few times at work Christmas parties and end-of-year parties, and you were long since divorced when we were in graduate school, but I knew it was him as soon as I saw those brown eyes and his killer smile. You probably didn't know it then, but we all hated you, at least we single girls did. We were always so jealous of you when you went to a party with him. Damn, Allison, I can't believe you let him get away with that. Well, it clearly wasn't one of my better moments, and for your information, it's been 18 years since our divorce. Oh my God, just saying that makes me feel old. Anyway, I can't believe he's back after all these years. Maybe he's just visiting his parents. I think they still live here. No, I think he came back to town a few weeks ago. He said something about being the new managing partner at his law firm's office here in Charleston. Right now, he's in the process of remodeling his parents' house on James Island. From what he said, it's gotten too much for them to handle, so they're moving into one of those retirement homes in Mount Pleasant, and Kevin's moving into their house by the river. That's interesting. I haven't heard a word from him since he left town for Chicago after our divorce. Even all our friends gradually lost touch with him. But the last time I heard from him was about 12 or 13 years ago when someone showed me a picture of him and his new wife. I think she was a doctor of some sort. I don't remember much about her, except that I remember how beautiful she was, and how I was very angry at how happy they looked. Eventually, I turned the conversation to something more pleasant and tried to put Kevin out of my mind. We finished lunch, and I went back to school to go over the final student and teacher assignments for the upcoming school year before classes start again next month. As principal of Riverview Elementary School, this was one of my least favorite tasks. But unfortunately, it's part of the job, so I can just suck it up and get it over with. This was my first year at Riverview, so it took me a little longer than usual due to the fact that I wasn't as familiar with the teachers and students as I was at my previous school. At least it would take my mind off of thinking about Kevin. I finished work around 5 o'clock and headed home, grabbing some chicken choy mein from my favorite Chinese restaurant on the way. I was still living in the little house that Kevin and I had bought when we first got married. He was so anxious to get out of town during the divorce. The last thing he wanted was to be tied to a house where we had very little property. So he gladly gave me the house in exchange for my not contesting the divorce. Once inside, I threw my keys on the counter, grabbed a bottle of wine from the refrigerator, and found the largest glass in the house. I already knew this was going to be a bottle of wine night, not a glass of wine night. After pouring myself a glass, I settled down in front of the TV with dinner and tried to distract myself with some mindless show on the Travel Channel. But my thoughts kept returning to Kevin and that period in our lives when everything had gone from perfect to absolutely ruined in a few short months. I couldn't help but feel responsible for everything that happened then. I was young and immature in many ways, heck, we both were. But that doesn't excuse my actions. We both made some really bad choices, and unfortunately it proved to be too hard for us. Now, after all these years, he's back in town, and it was only a matter of time before I ran into him somewhere. I could imagine how awkward it would be when I met his new wife. I felt inferior just looking at their picture all those years ago, seeing how beautiful she was and hearing that she was a doctor. I have a doctorate too, but that somehow doesn't sound like an MD to me. What would I say if I ran into them? As the TV went on, my thoughts went back to when we first met. I had met Kevin Middleton during freshman orientation the summer we both started college. He was an outgoing, tall, good-looking baseball player, and I was a pretty good-looking girl who was very shy, and maybe a bit of a tomboy, if I may say so. But somehow we connected that weekend and became very close friends. It went on like that until junior year, when we realized we were starting to have feelings for each other. But even then, it took a few months before we went on a real date, and then 4 more dates before we became close. We were such good friends that I think we were both a little hesitant to break that relationship until we were convinced that what we had was more than just friendship. When we started dating, Kevin was the perfect gentleman and took things very slowly, never pushing me faster than I was ready. In fact, at first I was a little hurt that he didn't try anything with me. After all, I'd been his friend since we moved to campus, and I'd seen him take more than one girl home from bars after knowing them for only a few hours. Kevin was the typical big man on campus. He was athletic, handsome, and very smart. So it wasn't hard at all to find girls willing to do it with him. I, on the other hand, was very shy and inexperienced. Things were getting pretty hectic on the dance floor when Kevin approached me. He leaned in close to my ear and asked, "How about you take this to my apartment?" I didn't say a word. I just took his hand and pulled him towards the door. When we got to his apartment, he quickly unlocked the door and led me inside, then closed the door and locked it behind us. That's where we got down to it. Over the next week, life went on as I continued to prepare for the start of the new school year. I had pretty much put Kevin out of my mind and convinced myself that the chances of running into him were slim to none when suddenly it happened. I walked out of my office to grab something from the printer, and as I crossed the threshold, I saw him sitting in front of the attendant secretary's desk. He was much older than the last time I'd seen him, but there was no doubt that it was indeed Kevin. But why the hell was he here at my school? I'd never heard that he and his wife had kids, but apparently they did. Why else would he be in elementary school? My first thought was to run to my office, shut the door, and sit there until he left. But if he has kids here, he'll eventually find out I'm the principal of the school, so I might as well deal with it now. Damn, I suddenly wished I'd taken the time to put on a nicer dress and makeup this morning, but now it was too late. I managed to walk across the office to the door to the attendant's office without him noticing. "Hey, Kevin, good to see you again." He looked around to see who was there, and I continued. "I can't believe it's really you. Who would believe that after all these years without a word from you, I would walk out of my office and see you sitting there in the flesh? Tell me how you're doing." "Oh my God, Allison, is that really you? I had no idea you worked here. Hell, I didn't even know if you still lived in town." He rose from his chair for a moment, as if unsure of what to do, before he finally opened his arms and leaned over to hug me. "It's been a while, hasn't it? You still look beautiful, by the way." "Thank you, that's very nice of you. Tell me, what do you do?" "Well, obviously, I still live here. In fact, not only am I still here in Charleston, but I still live in our old house. I went back to school after my divorce, finished my master's and doctorate in education, and have been working on principal for the last 5 years. But I've only been working here for about a month. This will be my first year as principal at Riverview. So now you know my story, but what in God's name are you doing here? Don't tell me you have kids?" "Well, as a matter of fact, I do. I actually have 3, and I'm doing what most parents do when they move to a new town, enrolling them in school. Right now they're with my mom, but I'm sure you'll get to know them when school starts. I have a daughter who will be in 5th grade and 2 sons, one in 3rd grade and one in kindergarten." At this point, I was mentally searching for a way to escape. My inability to have children was the beginning of our problems, and I could feel myself starting to lose my temper. So I quickly tried to think of a way to wrap things up and escape to my office before I did something embarrassing. "Wow, I'm so happy for you. I'm looking forward to meeting them. I'm sure if they're anything like you, they'll be great students. Well, I've kept you long enough, and I'm sure you need to get back to work, so I'll go ahead and let you finish up here. But I hope to see you and your wife at our open house in a few weeks. I'm looking forward to seeing her and the kids. I wouldn't miss it. I know the kids are excited about the new school, and they can't wait to meet the new teachers. But by the way, the kids and I are on our own. My wife passed away last year. Oh my God, Kevin, I had no idea. I'm so sorry to hear that. I guess that's what I get for my assumptions. I felt my face redden with embarrassment. I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you and the kids since her death. I just can't imagine what it's like to go through something like that, and how hard it is for you guys. Look, if there's anything I can do to help your kids adjust to a new town and a new school, please let me know. Thank you, Allison. That's really nice of you. It's actually the main reason I moved here. We all needed a change of scenery, and I thought it would be good for the kids to be around family more. Plus, Mom and Dad are thrilled to be able to spoil them every day. Well, I've taken up enough of your time, so I'll let you get back to work. But it was really good to see you again. It's good to see you too. I guess I'll see you again. That night was a repeat of the night after Lisa told me Kevin was back in town. I just couldn't get him out of my thoughts and dreams. Over the next few nights, I repeatedly woke up in a sweat. All the dreams started the same way, with happy memories of Kevin and I together, and ended with the horrors of the day he caught me with Patrick Westbrook. I'd managed to put those bad memories behind me a long time ago, until Kevin came out of nowhere and turned my world upside down. I thought I had forgiven myself and moved on with my life, but it was so much easier when Kevin completely disappeared from view. My affair only lasted a couple months, but it completely ruined my life and the future I had planned. The following week, Lisa and I met up again for lunch, as we always did on Mondays during the summer. We both worked as educators, so summer was the only time we really got to meet for lunch. After school resumed, we got together about once a month to spend an evening together. But unlike me, Lisa had a husband and family to take care of, so those evenings usually consisted of an early dinner and a trip to the movies because she usually had to get home pretty early. We talked about school and her kids before I finally realized she couldn't resist anymore. So, are you going to tell me about seeing Kevin again after all these years? I can't believe he has kids, and that out of all the schools in the area, they will be attending your school this year. Yeah, it's a small world, isn't it? I honestly don't know how to feel about all of this. It was really great to see him again, and you were right. He looks as good as ever. I'm just not sure what it's like to see him regularly at school. He was nice enough when I saw him, but I just can't believe it wouldn't be very awkward after everything that happened between us. He was so aloof and cold when we got divorced. It seemed like all the crap of our last year together just broke him, but maybe time has at least healed the wounds a little bit. He definitely looked like the old Kevin when I saw him at school. I think you're probably overthinking this. He's probably long since forgotten about everything that happened between you two. I bet if you both were honest with yourselves and really thought back to everything that happened when you were married, you'd find that the good memories far outweigh the bad. By the way, I hope you don't mind me asking, but my curiosity is killing me. What exactly happened between you and Kevin? I didn't know you very well back then, but I heard rumors that you cheated on him with that math teacher who left shortly after you and Kevin broke up. Then when I got to know you better, I just couldn't believe you could have done something like that. And I didn't want to pry, so I just dismissed those rumors. No, I didn't mind. You heard it all right. I was pregnant the year before, and I miscarried twice. Then I went through all kinds of tests, and it turned out I could never have children. So Kevin and I decided it would be best for me to get my tubes tied. After that, it was like a wedge was driven between us. We both wanted kids so badly. I guess I started to drift away from Kevin, and he got caught up in his work. In my mind, the wedge in our marriage was his fault, and I was very angry that he left me when I needed him most. He worked 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. I tried to move on with my life, but there was always a hole I couldn't fill. Patrick appeared and found a sympathetic ear. We had lunch every day in his classroom, and he would listen to me complain about all my problems, and I would listen to him complain about his wife, who he said made him feel inferior because she looked down on him, because he was only a teacher. Did it ever occur to you that you were being played and that all he wanted to do was get in your pants? I realize now that he was just using me, but at the time I was so hungry for attention that I was willing to do anything to get it. He took advantage of my state of mind and acted like he was interested in all my problems. He made himself look like an abandoned spouse, just like me, to make me feel connected to him, and then made me feel an intimacy with him that I didn't feel with Kevin at the time. I should have seen it coming, but I was too immersed in self-pity to realize what he was doing. He convinced me to start going to the local park after school every Wednesday so we could just walk and talk in solitude, and I fell for the ploy. Wow, Allison, I never knew those rumors were true. I just always thought it was just a coincidence that he left school just before your divorce. You know how we teachers like to use our imaginations. So, since you've piqued my curiosity, can you tell me exactly how Kevin managed to catch you? Asked Lisa. Well, Kevin and I had barely spoken to each other at that point, so I had no idea that he and his friend Logan regularly stopped after work to run in this very park. The universe just lined up perfectly so that we ended up there at the same time that day. Kevin recognized my car, as well as a car he didn't know, parked in one of the far parking lots as he ran past on one of the trails, and came over to check it out. Just like the previous times we'd met in the park, Patrick and I sat in the back seat. Like I said, it felt so good to have a man wanting me again that I didn't even think to make him stop and let him continue. Before I knew it, we were already at it. And then all of a sudden, the back door of the car opened and I felt Patrick being pulled out of the car. When I opened my eyes, I saw Kevin dragging him by the hair across the parking lot, shouting profanities at both of us. Kevin slammed the door shut, climbed into the front seat, started the car, and drove off, leaving Patrick lying on the ground, naked to the waist. Nah! He drove to the parking lot where his car was parked on the other side of the park, collected Patrick's clothes, wallet, and keys and threw them in the car, then drove off. To make matters worse, he also took my car keys, leaving me in the park. Thank God he left my cell phone, otherwise I don't know what I would have done. When I was finally able to get home, he had already packed up and left. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer his cell phone or his work phone. It took almost a week before I finally saw him, and he made it clear that he had no intention of putting up. Oh shit, that's one hell of a story. How come I never heard about it until now? Asked Lisa. Like it's not obvious. It's not something you want a lot of people to know about. Kevin offered not to sue on the grounds of infidelity if I agreed not to contest the divorce. I didn't have much of a choice. Kevin worked at a large law firm and had all these legal resources, and I was a teacher with very little income. So he gave me the house, which we had very little equity in at the time, and we split the bank accounts and went our separate ways. I never understood why he was so generous with the house. After all, his parents had given us the down payment as a wedding gift. But I really wasn't in a position to make waves. He barely spoke to me the whole time and left town as soon as the divorce was finalized. All I knew at that point was that he had taken a job at his firm's office in Chicago. The only good thing about the whole thing was that I was able to escape with some dignity. So what happened to Patrick after that evening in the park? After that day, he avoided me like the plague. True, he talked to me long enough to tell me that Kevin had visited him and his wife to return his pants and wallet. He didn't say anything else except that he didn't want to lose his wife, which meant we couldn't communicate anymore. He left town a few months after that, and later I found out that his wife had gotten a new job and they had moved to Savannah. Oh God, I don't know what to say. But unfortunately, as fascinating as this story is, I really have to go. I'll call you later and you can finish the story. If I don't hurry, I'll be late picking up the kids from day camp. But I'm counting on you to keep me posted on this whole situation. Next school year promises to be very interesting. I'm not sure interesting is the word I'd use. Nightmare is probably a more appropriate word. That night, sitting on the back porch with a stiff margarita, I replayed the whole sneaky episode with Patrick in my head. How could I have been so stupid? I knew all along it was wrong. A married woman shouldn't trust any man but her husband, and she certainly shouldn't have fun with any man but her husband. And suddenly the truth was right in front of me. It was my fault. I blamed Patrick for seducing me for years, taking advantage of me and convincing me to do things I didn't want to do. But it was a lie. I was the one who opened up to him, telling him about all the problems in my marriage. I was the one who didn't stop him when he kissed me that first time. I was the one who kept meeting him in that park, knowing how it would all end. And more importantly, I didn't just let it go further. I wanted it to. I wanted to feel needed and wanted. I wanted it all. And it wasn't until I lost everything that I saw what it was. A cheap substitute for the real thing. My God. How could I have been so stupid? Finally, after a hellish pity party and 3 margaritas, I'd had enough of my miserable past, so I dragged my drunken ass to bed. But even then, sleep didn't come. I replayed the events of my novel in my head, and I found it hard to believe that I had actually done those things, but I knew I had. How could I have been so stupid? Eventually, after a good cry, the alcohol took over and I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I felt like hell. My head hurt, my stomach was upset, and it was all I could do to drag myself out of bed and into the shower, but I had too much to do to stay home today. The rest of that week was very busy as the whole school was getting ready for the start of the new year. I even managed to put Kevin and self-pity out of my mind for a few days. But then Thursday came and it dawned on me that today would be the open house and he would probably be here with his kids. My stomach had been tied in knots all day, but I managed to get everything done that needed to be done and managed to run home in time for a quick shower. I don't know why it mattered to me, but I wanted to look my best for Kevin. He looked so handsome in his suit and tie that day at the office. I guess I wanted him to know that even after all these years, I was still pretty good at tidying up. I chose my favorite black dress. I probably spent more time than usual on my hair and makeup, but the finished product looked damn good to say the least. Taking one last look at myself in the mirror, I took a deep breath, told myself once again that everything was going to be okay, and hurried out the door to make it on time. That evening, the school was filled with students and parents going from room to room, getting to know their new teachers and filling out all the necessary forms for the new year. For me, the evening was spent socializing and introducing myself as the new principal. It wasn't until almost at the very end that I finally saw him. He was talking to one of the kindergarten teachers, and he was being held by the hand of a cute little blonde-haired boy. In that very moment, I saw Kevin in a way I had never seen him before. I had seen the feisty athlete, the fun-loving student, the loving husband, and the serious lawyer, but I had never seen him as a father. I felt tears come to my eyes at the thought that it was our children who had to hold his hand and call him Daddy. I quickly ran into the restroom to gather my thoughts, and after a good cry, I wiped my eyes and fixed my makeup, and then went back outside, telling myself to just keep my cool, and it would all be over soon. When I came out of the restroom, I immediately saw them walking down the hallway, so I figured I could get this over with and headed over to the kids to introduce myself. Hi, Kevin. Did you guys find everything okay? Yeah, I think so. We've met all the teachers and learned where everything is, so I think we're ready for Monday. And these must be your kids. Hello, young ladies. I'm Miss Middleton, and you are? I asked his daughter, extending my hand. She shook my hand like an adult and introduced herself. I'm Hannah, and these are my brothers, Will and Michael. It's nice to meet you, I said, squatting down to shake their little hands. I'm so glad you'll be here this year. I'm sure we'll have the best time, and I know you'll love Riverview. Just then I heard a thin voice say, Hey, Daddy, her name is the same as ours. Caught off guard, I didn't know what to say, but Kevin didn't hesitate to respond. That's right, son. She has the same name. I guess you have no excuse for not remembering her name, do you? About this time, Will, his middle son, spoke up. So, Miss Middleton, are you related to us? And I was a little more nimble this time and answered him, No, dear, I'm not related to you, but your father and I are longtime good friends. In fact, we went to college together. Sometime I'll tell you some stories about how young he was. Now, if your father doesn't mind, there are muffins and juice in the cafeteria if you're interested." Instantly, the trio of voices pleaded, "May I, Daddy? Can I, Dad?" Kevin quickly gave in and off they went, bursting through the cafeteria doors. "Well, I guess I should get going and you guys go find your kids," I said. Turning to leave, I paused for a second and turned to him again. "I know this isn't a surprise to you, but you have 3 beautiful children. I'm very happy for you, Kevin. I only wish I had the opportunity to meet their mother." "Thank you, Allison. That's very nice of you," he said as he headed for the cafeteria door. I stared after him and was about to turn to leave when he turned to me again and said, "Hold on a second, Allison. Can I ask you something?" "Sure. What do you want to ask me?" I replied, turning to face him again. He looked around nervously for a few seconds before he finally spoke. "Okay, let's get started. First off, it was really nice to see you again. I'll admit it's a little awkward, but it's still nice. I've been thinking a lot about us this past week and how things ended between us. And gosh darn it, Allison, I can't get you out of my mind since I saw you here a few weeks ago. If you get uncomfortable, just tell me and I'll stop. But seeing you brought back old feelings, and I can't escape the feeling that we still have a lot of unfinished emotional business that we need to put behind us. Hell, we've never even seriously talked about any of it, and I take the blame for that. So I'll just lay my cards on the table. Seeing you again made me feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. I know it might seem crazy, but I really want to ask you if you'd like to go on a real date sometime. But before I can do that, I need to tell you something about our divorce. Something I don't think you know. Something I should have told you years ago. Something you have a right to know. Then, after that, if you don't mind, I want to ask you out. But I want you to be able to answer with full knowledge of everything that happened back then. If you're not interested at all, just tell me and I'll drop the whole thing. But I still want to tell you the whole truth. So I guess the question I want to ask you today is, can we meet soon so I can tell you some things I think you deserve to know? Wow, I don't know what to say. Honestly, that's the last thing I thought you'd ever say to me. Ever since that day at the office, I've been thinking about you, about us, all the time. Honestly, I've even dreamt about us. I've replayed in my head 1,000 times all those years ago. And I have to admit, I'm definitely intrigued to go out with you someday. But I'm a little intimidated by the secret you have to tell me. So I guess what I'm saying is that yes, I'd love to meet you so we can talk about this great secret of yours. And after that, we can decide on a date. Okay, that sounds like a plan. I don't know what else to say since I wasn't sure how you'd react. So, would you mind spending this weekend so we can sit down and talk? I think I can arrange that, Mr. Middleton. How about Saturday? That sounds great, Allison. The kids are going camping with my brother's family this weekend, so maybe I can pick you up around 9 o'clock and we can talk over breakfast? 9 o'clock would be fine with me. I'll look forward to it since you've piqued my curiosity. I'd give you the address, but hopefully you can still find your way to our old house. See you later. I spent Friday doing the last little things in preparation for the start of classes on Monday, but Friday night was a different story. The evening stretched on endlessly as I replayed every possible scenario of what Kevin had to say to me. It could have been any one of a number of things. I'd seen him in town with that redhead from his office shortly after we'd broken up. Maybe he wanted to tell me that he'd started seeing her before our divorce was even final. Or maybe he wanted to tell me about his meeting with Patrick and his wife. I never found out the full details of what happened when Kevin got his stuff back. For all I know, maybe he just wanted to tell me that he had already decided to divorce me before he found out about my affair. Finally, after drinking too much wine again, I fell asleep on the couch, and the next moment I looked at my phone and realized with horror that it was 8:30. Damn. He'd be here in 30 minutes, and I was still wearing the same clothes I'd worn to work yesterday. I took a quick shower and got dressed, barely finishing my makeup when I heard the doorbell ring. Taking one last look in the mirror to make sure everything was in place, I opened the door. "Good morning, sunshine," he said when I opened the door. "I haven't decided if this is a good thing or not yet. As you can tell, I'm still not much of a morning person. I guess you remember that and are using it to your advantage to give away your big secret while I'm still not fully awake, I joked. I grabbed my purse and closed the door behind me as we headed down the sidewalk to his car. Ever since the day he showed up at the school office, I couldn't get the thought out of my head that almost everything in his life since our divorce made me mildly jealous. I ended up divorced, unable to have children, and alone except for a few close female friends and a few romantic relationships that never seemed to last longer than 6 months. Somehow, Kevin had remarried a beautiful woman, had 3 wonderful children, had a successful career. And now, as we walked to my driveway, he confirmed all of those sentiments when I saw him pick me up in a Mercedes SL 550 Roadster convertible. I was already mad at him, and he hadn't even told me his big secret yet. I managed to marry Kevin's poor young lawyer, and his second wife got Kevin's rich and successful lawyer. He must have read my mind because when we got into the car, he paused for a second, handed me the keys and said, "Why don't you drive?" I think I gave new meaning to the phrase, "drive like you stole it." Kevin didn't say a word. He just leaned back in his seat while I wore out my nerves testing his powerful little toy for strength. Once seated in the restaurant, we ordered and I told him about the last 18 years of Allison Middleton's life. Not that it took long, and he told me about his wife and children. The conversation was light and friendly, but I could sense that he was nervous. Finally, when our food was brought to us, he mustered up the courage to tell me the reason we were sitting here. Putting down his fork, he moved slightly in his seat and began, "Now, I don't know how to tell you all of this, so I'm going to start at the beginning, and you can stop me if it doesn't make sense to you. I think it's best to start right after my second miscarriage. When we found out we couldn't have children, it felt like my whole world came crashing down. All the dreams and plans I had made for our lives would never come true. I think we were both in the same position, but neither of us were mature enough to deal with the situation properly, and we kind of went into our own shells and withdrew from the world." Pausing to gather his thoughts, he continued, "You were detached and depressed, and nothing I tried helped. It seemed to me that you had lost all interest in me. I was angry. I was angry at you because somehow, in my opinion, it was your fault that we could never have children. I realize now that I was wrong, but back then I was just angry at everything. I was angry that you wouldn't talk to me about anything. I felt like I couldn't talk to you because it seemed like all you did was sit on the couch and cry when you were home. Please understand, I'm not saying any of these things were true about you. I'm only saying that those were my feelings at the time." "I can certainly understand all of that," I told him. "I think we were both in a lot of pain, and we were so young. We'd never had to face something so serious, and we did the best we could given the circumstances. Unfortunately, we made some huge mistakes, and before we knew it, things were out of control. I pulled away from you, but I felt like you pulled away from me as well. I wish we could have talked about this 18 years ago." "Agreed, but keep that thought in your head while I tell you the rest, because it's going to get worse from here. Briefly about what you know. I caught you in the car with that guy Patrick. I packed up, I left, and we got divorced. But what you don't know is that while you were cheating with Patrick, I was cheating on you with Casey Graham from my office. I was in so much pain that I just wanted to walk away and move on with my life, and when I found out about you and Patrick, I used that to get you to agree to a divorce without fighting me." "Oh my God, Kevin. It all makes so much more sense now. This is why you never wanted to go to counseling or even consider reconciliation." I could feel the anger building up inside of me as I asked him, "So tell me, Kevin, how long did your affair last before you found out about Patrick?" "Well, it depends on what you consider the beginning. A few weeks after the tubal ligation, we were working on that big case that was taking up so much of my time. Things were very complicated between us at that point, and Casey seemed interested in my problems and willingly listened to me. At first it was just talking, and I was so relieved to have someone to talk to. I know I should have talked to you instead of her, and then nothing would have happened, but I didn't. I kept talking to her, and before I knew it, things were out of control. It all started with a kiss after going out for drinks a few weeks after a long day of examining the evidence. I felt so guilty and knew I should have stopped it then, but didn't. Then, A few weeks after that, we got into it at her apartment. This was about 3 weeks before I caught you with Patrick. I was with her probably 5 or 6 times during that time, and then we were together for about 2 months after we broke up. Okay, Kevin, you really have to give me a minute. I had no idea all of this was going on. I guess I was so wrapped up in self-pity that I didn't notice what you were doing at the time. Now I don't know if I'm happy that I finally found out the truth, or angry that you waited so long to tell me and let me spend 18 years blaming myself. What you were doing to this Casey was almost identical to what was going on between me and Patrick, but apparently you were better at it than I was, because I got caught and you didn't. My God, how could I have been so stupid? You weren't stupid, Allison. You were walking around in this emotional fog just trying to survive. Besides, I wasn't exactly lucky enough to catch you in that park. Patrick's wife had contacted me a week or so before and said she suspected he was having an affair with you, but couldn't prove it. So I brought in one of the investigators we use at work, and he did me the favor of following you around after work a few times and telling me that you went to the park with Patrick after work every Wednesday. The day I caught you, I was there before you got there and watched everything from behind a tree. When I realized you were actually going to do it with him, I rushed to my car and broke off the relationship. At this point, my head was spinning as I tried to match what I remembered of that time with what I was now being told. So tell me, Kevin, in all these years, has it ever occurred to you that I deserve to know the truth about my life? Because it seems to me that the only reason I'm finding out the truth now is because you want something from me, and you were afraid it would all blow up if I found out later from someone else. To be completely honest, I've had those thoughts over the years, but I always thought it was best for everyone not to reopen those wounds. Hell, in those first few years I was so messed up, I couldn't think about anyone but myself. All I did during that time was work and go from one woman to another, trying to feel whole again. It wasn't until I met Suzanne that everything fell into place in my mind. She didn't even consider marrying me until we went through some pretty extensive premarital counseling. It was that counseling that helped me deal with what happened between us, taught me how to be responsible in a relationship and how to deal with things properly. In fact, it was Suzanne who encouraged me to contact you and tell you about all of this. She tried to convince me that you deserved to know. But I was ashamed of what I'd done, and I justified not telling you, convincing myself that it wasn't fair to rip the rug out from under your life just to ease my conscience. He paused again, apparently to see if I had anything to say, but I was still trying to make sense of everything, so he continued. So, if I haven't made myself perfectly clear, I need you to hear that I am very sorry for my cheating and for participating in the destruction of our marriage. I also regret not coming clean to you years ago. It wasn't fair to you, and I know it's not much, but all I can say at this point is that I'm sorry. I guess I just need some time to think about it all. I can't think straight, and I'm afraid I'll say or do something that I'll regret later if I don't get everything sorted out before we talk again. If you don't mind, I think I really need to go home. I understand. Look, I realize that after all this, you may never want to talk to me again, and if that's what you want, I'll respect your decision. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I was married to Suzanne. I don't know how to describe it, but I truly loved you both equally. I realized that you were special, even as early as freshman year, and I was damn lucky to have you as a friend. By the time we started dating, I already knew you were the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but I wasn't sure if you felt the same way. I wish I could go back in time and do things differently, but I can't. All I can do is try to learn from my mistakes and not repeat them. I just hope you find it in your heart to give me another chance, and if you do, I'll live the rest of my life trying to prove it to you. I think if you spend some time with me, you'll see that I'm a completely different person than I was back then, and I bet you've hung up a lot too. I had nothing else to say at that point, so he paid the bill and drove me home. We drove in silence until he pulled up in my driveway. We got out of the car, and he walked me to the door. So, what are we going to do next? Right now, I'm not sure. I guess I'll just have to try to think this through. In the meantime, I guess I'll see you around. I closed the door and watched him leave, not knowing what our future would be. For the next couple weeks, he and I didn't see each other or talk. Days were taken up with studying, and I spent my evenings trying to make sense of our conversation on Saturday morning. I was overwhelmed with emotions ranging from anger to relief, confusion, and anger again. Finally, after being given time to think about everything I now knew about our past, I came to a decision. It took me a few days to work up the courage, but finally I called his office. Hello, this is Kevin Middleton. How can I help you? Hello, Kevin, it's me. I've been thinking about everything you've said, and I think I've come to a decision regarding what you asked me to do. After an awkward pause, he said, So, are you going to keep me in suspense, or are you going to tell me what you're thinking? I've been depressed the whole time since that Saturday, and was hoping you'd call me back at some point. Okay, first you have to realize that I'm still very angry that you didn't tell me the truth sooner. But I can understand why you didn't. Second, I don't know if we can get through this or not, but I think we owe it to you to at least try. If we didn't, I know I would always wonder, what if? So, if you're still interested, I'd like to accept your invitation to go out with you. Oh my God. You had me worried for a moment. I can promise you that I'm definitely still interested. So, Miss Middleton, are you available for dinner this Saturday? Yes, Mr. Middleton. I'm sure I'm free on Saturday. Very well. I'll pick you up at 6 o'clock. Wear something casual. As we were about to hang up, I said, Wait, Kevin, I have one more thing to say. I need to tell you that I too am truly sorry for my cheating. I tried to make excuses for it, to blame it on Patrick or you, but I've recently come to the realization that it was entirely my fault. So I'm sorry for cheating on you. I'm sorry I lied to you, and I'm sorry I hurt you. Maybe we can both work on that forgiveness together. I'm sorry I'm running away, but I have to go. I'll see you on Saturday. Bye. I spent the next few days trying to focus on work, but it was no use. I was completely distracted, replaying every possible scenario and conversation in my head, from our date going well and ending up in bed together, to us having a huge fight and never speaking to each other again. Well, at least those two extremes are familiar to me, so I think I can handle everything in between. Finally, Saturday night came, and not sure what he meant, I decided to wear what would be appropriate in many places, a modest sundress and flat sandals. I guess he really did mean casual, since he showed up at my door in shorts, a button-down shirt and flip-flops. The conversation was easy and comfortable as we drove into downtown Charleston, parked near the Battery, and walked down East Bay Street to a small seafood and oyster bar. I hope this place is okay, he said. I've been here a few times with my triathlon club, and it reminded me of this place we used to go to in college. It's beautiful. Believe it or not, I've lived in Charleston for over 20 years, and I've never been here, but it looks great. We had a wonderful dinner and talked for hours, just like we used to in college. We talked about my career, my unstable personal life, and he was open to all my questions about Suzanne. He told me about how they met, about his life in Chicago. We talked about his children and Suzanne's cancer. I was amazed at how openly he talked to me about how hard it was for him and the children after her death. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he said, I hate to do this, but I have to go home. I promised the babysitter I'd be back by 11 o'clock, and if we don't go now, I won't make it. So, he paid the bill, and we headed back to my house. About halfway there, I noticed that he had been a little quiet since we left the restaurant. What's on your mind? You haven't said anything since we got in the car. Nothing bad, but I have something I feel like I need to tell you before we go any further, and I was just trying to think of a way to tell you about it. Well, since you asked, let's get started. I had a wonderful time tonight, and I hope you did too. In fact, there's nothing I'd like more than to do it again very soon. But if you're interested in keeping it going, I need to ask you a couple of favors. First, my kids can't know anything about us right now. If things get more serious, of course I'll put them at the table and tell them everything, but this is something they need to hear from me. So I need you to promise me that you won't mention that we're together until I'm ready to talk to them. Next, and this is the hardest part to talk about, I need you to understand that I'm not ready to be in a physical relationship with anyone right now. Since I met Suzanne, she is the only woman I have had an intimate relationship with. We have been faithful to each other for 15 years, and it will take me a little more time before I am ready to open up that part of myself to someone else. So please be patient with me. We drove in silence for a few minutes until I was sure he was done, and only then did I answer him. Okay, so it wasn't that bad, right? Let me see. Where do I start? Let's start by saying that I had a great time tonight, and I'd love to go out with you again. In fact, I'm going to hunt you down and really hurt you if you don't ask me out on another date real soon, mister. As for your kids, I would never tell them anything about us until you are ready to tell them. You're absolutely right to protect them after all they've been through because of their mother's death. So on that, we're in complete agreement. Now about the no physical relationship thing, you do remember that we had the same agreement when we first started dating, and that was 25 years ago, wasn't it? It worked out then, and I'm sure it will work out now. In fact, I think it says a lot about your relationship with Suzanne that you still respect your marriage so much even a year after she's gone, and it's even very gratifying. So why don't we just play this part by ear, and I think we'll both understand when the time comes. He only said thank you in response, before taking my hand and holding it in his until we pulled into my driveway. After walking me to the door, he kissed me on the cheek, said goodnight, and promised to call me soon to set up another date, which he did the following Tuesday. We continued to see each other a couple times a week for the next few months. Things were going well from my perspective, but I could tell he was still very cautious. One Friday night when we got back to my house, instead of coming out and walking me to the door, he took my hand and said, "Wait a minute. I want to talk to you about something." My heart almost stopped in my chest when he said that. The first thought that came to my mind was that he was going to tell me that things weren't working out and we wouldn't be able to see each other again. After what seemed like an eternity had passed, he finally spoke again. "I was wondering if you could come over tomorrow afternoon. I was thinking of grilling hot dogs and hamburgers with the kids, and then maybe talk to them about you and me." Before I could answer, I felt tears streaming down my face. There's nothing in this world that would make me happier. But are you sure you're ready? Because in case you haven't noticed yet, I love you, Kevin Middleton, and I'm going to wait for you for as long as it takes for you to be 100% sure. Well, I think you've been patient enough, and I think it's time for the kids, my family, and the world to know how much I love you. Before he could say another word, I leaned over the console of his car, took his head in my hands, and kissed him hard, pressing his lips to mine as the tears continued to flow. When I pulled away from him, he said, "Wow, I hope you'll be just as excited about my next question." He paused for a few seconds as if trying to find the right words before he finally spoke again. "I was also wondering if you would be willing to go on a little trip with me next weekend during fall break. My parents have a small cabin in the mountains near Brevard, North Carolina, and they've agreed to watch the kids so we can have some time to ourselves if you're free. If that means what I think it means, I can pack up and leave with you tonight. But I've waited this long, so I think I can hold out for another week." The next day, I pulled up to Kevin's house around 4 o'clock, just as we had agreed the day before. I remembered the house from back when we were married and his parents lived in it. But he had completely remodeled and modernized the entire house. I stood at the huge windows in the family room, admiring the amazing view of Clark Sound and the beautifully landscaped yard that led to the boat dock. While I waited, Kevin gathered the kids and one by one they ran down the stairs to see why the principal had come to their house on Saturday. When they were all gathered, Kevin sat them down on the couch and told them that he and I were longtime friends, that we really liked each other, and that he wanted me to be his girlfriend, if that was okay with them. The boys were excited about the idea, but I noticed that Hannah was a little concerned. When I asked her what was bothering her, she simply asked if I was going to marry her daddy. I knew she really wanted to know, so I tried my best to let her know that I wasn't trying to replace her mom, that I just wanted to be her dad's friend and get to know her and the boys better for now. This seemed to calm her down, but I realized that it would take more time to fully win her affection. We ate on the patio afterward, and after dinner we went down to the dock and rode on Grandpa's boat before I finally headed home. The next week was excruciatingly long. Kevin and I talked every day, but he was working late so he could finish things early on Friday so we could leave as soon as school was over. So we didn't see each other at all until Friday. Friday morning, I went to his house and loaded my stuff in the car so he could pick me up right from school to save time. I was a little disappointed to find out that he was planning on driving his Tahoe this weekend. I was really hoping I'd get a chance to drive his little convertible on the winding mountain roads. But it would have been a little difficult to cram our luggage into the car, much less his kids for the trip to school. As we loaded into the car to head to school, I noticed that Hannah hurried outside to take the front passenger seat next to Dad. Kevin threw me a sorry look and started to say something to her, but I stopped him and told him that it was okay and that I would ride in the back with the boys for now. After Kevin dropped us off, I asked Hannah to wait for me in my office until I got the boys to class because I needed to talk to her about something. She didn't look very happy, but she didn't argue and sat down on the couch in my office to wait for me. When I came back, I sat down next to her and said, "Listen, Hannah, I wanted to talk to you privately about what's going on between me and your dad. I can see that you're having a hard time with all of this, and I want you to know that I understand. I know it's hard for you to see your dad with someone other than your mom, and I want you to know that I'm in no way trying to replace your mom. From everything your dad told me, your mom was a very special woman who loved him, you, and your brothers very much. No matter what happens between me and your dad, it's important for you to realize that he will never forget your mom, and neither should you. I hope you will always remember the special moments you had with her, and the special moments you all had as a family. I would never want to take that away from you. So how about you and I just stay friends? Nothing more. Can we do that?" "Yes, ma'am. I think I can do that. It's just that I really miss her sometimes, and I'm afraid that after a while we'll all just forget about her." "Honey, I can promise you that you'll never forget about her, and neither will your daddy. In fact, as an older sister, you should do your best to tell your brothers about her, because they weren't old enough to remember her the way you do, and you can help them realize how special she was. Now, how about you give me a big hug to cement our new friendship before you head off to class?" I almost cried as she put her arms around my neck and said, "Thank you, Miss Middleton. I'm sorry if I was rude to you." She got up to leave and turned to me and asked, "Maybe we could sit down sometime and I can show you some pictures of my mom and me? I want to tell you all about her." "I'd like that very much." With those words, she walked out the door and headed to her classroom. The rest of the day went smoothly, and I was more than ready to get into the front seat of the Tahoe when Kevin picked me up at 4 o'clock sharp as promised. The trip went without incident, and we quickly made it to the secluded cabin as early as 11 o'clock. The drive only took 5 hours, but we stopped for lunch in Columbia, and Kevin insisted that we stop at Cabela's to buy me hiking boots and appropriate clothing and socks. Hiking wasn't on my list of things to do for the weekend, but apparently it was on Kevin's list, so I relented. We also stopped for groceries at the local supermarket, the main thing being coffee and wine. The lodge was just perfect. It was rustic and secluded, no internet or TV, just perfect for a weekend away with someone special. As soon as we arrived, we unpacked the car and laid out the groceries, then sat down at the table for a drink and some relaxation before bed. I felt like this was a happy place for Kevin as he talked about living here with Suzanne and the kids. I could still sense some of Kevin's hesitation, even though this weekend was totally his idea. So, to help him relax, I suggested we just sleep in tonight after a long day and a long drive, and we could do other things tomorrow. He quickly agreed. It felt so good and so natural to be around this man. I drifted off to sleep thinking, this is where I belong. After breakfast, we got dressed and spent the rest of the day hiking in the Pisgah National Forest. Kevin had maps of trails and waterfalls for us to explore. It was amazingly beautiful terrain, and the waterfalls were spectacular, even if you had to hike a couple miles to find some of them. After a day in the forest, we returned to the cabin for dinner and another night of lovemaking. The next morning, my legs and hips were very sore from hiking, so we took a break and explored the many local antique stores and boutiques in town, and ended the day with a drive around the neighborhood to soak it all in. When I woke up on the last morning, I found the sun shining through the gaps in the curtains, and me alone in bed. I looked around, but I didn't find Kevin anywhere in the cabin. When I did find him, I saw him through the window swinging on the front porch swing with tears in his eyes. I have to admit that he made me a little nervous. I decided I'd better get out and see what was going on, so I put on jeans and a sweatshirt and walked out onto the porch. "Right now, you seem a little sad this morning. Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. "I guess so, if you're sure you want to know." I assured him that I did, and he continued. "Ever since Suzanne died, whenever I have a problem, when I need to make an important decision, or even when I'm feeling a little down, I go off by myself and just talk to her. Somehow just voicing things helps me make sense of whatever is going on in the moment." So, just before she died, we were lying together in her bed, and she pulled my face to hers and asked me to promise her that when she was gone, I wouldn't be alone, that I would find someone to love me and our children. I tried to turn the conversation around, but she pulled me to her again and insisted that I promise to move on with my life and find someone else. I realized from her eyes how serious she was, and I promised her I would. When I looked into her eyes, I could see that she was brimming with tears, and she just said, "Thank you." That was the last thing she said to me. Shortly after that, she fell asleep and never woke up again. I talked to her this morning and let her know that I had kept my promise to her. I told her about our last few months together and how the kids love having you around, even Hannah, even though she tries not to show it. I guess I just said goodbye to her one more time, because if you and I are going to be together, I need to start talking to you about all those things I've been talking to her about. So I guess I was a little sad, but the thought of a future life with you and my kids makes me really happy. I sat there listening to him, tears streaming down my face. I can tell that you really loved her, and I know that moving on with your life is a little scary for you. But I will tell you what I told Hannah the day we left. You don't have to forget about Suzanne to be with me. She was your wife and your lover for a long time. She was their mother. I'm not going to try to replace her because no one can do that. I just want to start now and build a new life with you and your children. Suzanne will forever be a part of you and a part of them. She played a huge part in who you all are today. Heck, I should be the one talking to her and thanking her for the wonderful job she did raising the kids and you." The following summer, we were married for the second time with a small ceremony by the water in our backyard. It was just the two of us with the kids and our parents, but it was beautiful. Sometimes I sit alone and just think about how lucky I am. Most relationships never recover from cheating, but our relationship after 2 cheating relationships is better than ever. We still fight from time to time and sometimes do hurtful things, but we always manage to talk things out and come out stronger in the end. I'm just thankful that Kevin and I have been able to show each other some mercy. Someone once told me that when someone shows you mercy, they offer you kindness and compassion while you deserve justice and punishment. I think that characterizes our second life together in the best possible way. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.